Welcome to True Crime Cases Today. We are unveiling a shocking story. The episode for today transports us to the sleepy Oklahoman town of Ardmore, neighborhood renowned for its close-knit families, conservative morals, and gossipy nature. Behind the surface of this apparently tranquil village, a tangled web that grows like wildfire. A startling murder would result from secrets and treachery. Albert Taylor was a 41-year-old guy who lives in Ardmore, Oklahoma, a tiny town renowned for its close-knit community and conservative values. Owned Taylor Auto Sales, a prosperous auto company in town that had been in his family for many generations. Albert Taylor was a respected businessman who was renowned for his honesty and integrity. Additionally, he served as a deacon at the nearby Baptist church, where he actively participated in community events. On the surface, Albert Taylor appeared to be the ideal husband and father, hardworking, compassionate, and dedicated to his wife and their daughter Macy. Yet behind this tidy exterior, Albert Taylor kept a serious secret for years. He battled with his sexuality, which conflicted with his town's conventional norms. And his religion, his internal conflict, caused him to lead a double life, frequently visiting Oklahoma City and Dallas for having unidentified sex with other guys while being deeply committed to his family. Albert Taylor felt cut off from them emotionally, particularly since his marriage to Sarah had become chilly and loveless. He battled to balance his actual sexual desires with the life he led in the years preceding his passing. One of those sexual encounters he felt compelled to lead was with Wilson, his Remy 18-year-old daughter, and her high school football star boyfriend Wilson had become close. Albert Taylor initially served as Wilson's mentor when Macy brought him to the family, giving him advice, assisting him in obtaining employment at the dealership, and even providing money assistance. But in practice, Albert Taylor was utilizing this mentoring to coerce her into keeping a secret. In the summer of 2021, Albert Taylor's double life started to catch up with him in a sexual relationship. His daughter Macy was eager to begin studies after graduating from high school. She was thrilled about her future at a nearby community college and intended to wed a Wilson that fall. Albert Taylor was juggling the mounting strain and trying to conceal his affair. Macy, who was usually close to her father at home, began to notice his odd behavior, but Albert Taylor appeared preoccupied and unaware of what was actually happening in the days before his death. Clearly focused on more than simply his family and professional commitments, he spent more time customary and private, sometimes taking long late-night drives or isolating himself in his home office. His double existence was finally coming to an end, bringing about the costly confrontation with his devoted. At around 7 o'clock, on the morning of August 14, 2021, he lost his life. The corpse of Albert Taylor was discovered on a Saturday. His daughter Macy was in their home's bathroom, and like many in the tranquil town of Ardmore, Oklahoma, Macy had gotten up early with the intention of going to Denny's for breakfast. She knocked on her father's bathroom door with her boyfriend pal Wilson, but no one answered. When she opened it, she saw the horrifying image of Albert Taylor lying on the chilly tile floor in a puddle. There was blood all around him, smeared on the bathroom mirror, and on the pistol Albert Taylor kept for. Macy cried out and dropped her phone as it lay on the floor by his dead hand. After a few seconds of standing frozen in amazement, she rushed back to her room and took her phone away. The ground and dialed 911. Remy's voice wavered as she talked, finding it difficult to describe. Her thoughts were racing, replaying the previous few days' events in an attempt to make sense of what had transpired. Knowing that her father, whom she had always admired, was now deceased, the dispatcher asked her to stay on the line until assistance came in an attempt to calm her down. But Macy remained in a panic, attempting to regain her breath by walking back and forth between the living room and the restroom. The first responders reached the family's small ranch-style home on the property in a matter of minutes. The paramedics on the outskirts of town promptly verified what Macy already knew, that her father had passed away. As the Remy world came to a head when she dropped into the front porch, tears flowing down her cheeks. had been abruptly upended, and word of the catastrophe swiftly circulated across Ardmore Inn, a place where rumors spread quickly, particularly in the era of Facebook and local news websites. Neighbors gathered outside the Taylor house after Albert Taylor's death stunned the entire community, gossiping and making assumptions about the possible fate of the man they knew as a good. Shortly after her father's body was discovered, Macy, a good citizen, was brought to the police station. Was discovered still in shock, scarcely able to comprehend what had happened. Her mother, Sarah, had been away, fully oblivious of the nightmare, when out of town visiting her sister in Tulsa and returning home. Waiting for her by mid-morning, the sleepy little hamlet of Ardmore was humming with uncertainty, terror, and the Ardmore Police Department came on the scene amid speculations of Albert Taylor's death. The scene at 7:30 in the morning. Less than half an hour after Macy Taylor made the announcement on August 14, 2021, Greg Marshall, a seasoned officer with more than 15 years of experience, is the main investigator for the frantic 9,911 call. The police were renowned for their meticulous handling of crime scenes, including the toilet where Albert Taylor's death was found. Was discovered to be a mess, despite being small and newly restored with white walls and white tile floors. Albert Taylor's head was encircled by blood, and the pistol, walls, and sink mirror were all coated with splatters. Smith was lying on the ground next to Albert Taylor's right hand in Wesson .38, and it was obvious that Albert Taylor had been shot. The cops had little hope of surviving because the bullet had penetrated his chest at close range. In the details, there were no indications of forced entry, and the remainder of the home remained undisturbed. Since there were smashed windows and nothing looked to have been taken, it didn't seem plausible that there had been a robbery. Incorrect, particularly in a community like Ardmore, where violent crimes were uncommon. Detective Marshall noted the location of the gun and Albert Taylor's hand while kneeling close to the deceased, but there was no sign of a fight in the restroom. But he thought that something about the scenario was strange, so he asked another officer. He also asked that the pistol be dusted for fingerprints and that the room be examined for any other trace evidence. A careful inspection of Albert Taylor's phone, which was situated near to the sink on the counter, Marshall was aware that people's phones nowadays frequently contain secrets, and he had a suspicion that Albert Taylor's would be. As the inquiry proceeded, the police employed Lumel, a chemical agent, to look for the only blood found in the residence, excluding any blood traces that may have been cleaned away elsewhere, was in the restrooms, implying that Albert Taylor was murdered there and that his body was not relocated following his murder. In order to ensure that nothing was overlooked, scene photographers captured every aspect. By midday, the investigators had collected every piece of evidence they could from the site, and the body was brought to the coroner's office in the area. Needed a thorough autopsy that would ultimately verify Albert Taylor's death from a single gunshot wound to the chest. It became evident as Marshall concluded their preliminary inquiry that they were dealing with something far more intimate had occurred than a straightforward mishap or house invasion. The first individual the cops questioned was Remy's 18-year-old daughter. After discovering her father's body, she was brought to the Ardmore Police Department, still in disbelief. Detective Greg Marshall realized later that morning that Macy would be subjected to a sensitive interrogation. As she sat in the interview room's little window, her hands were shaking and her face was pale with emotion. After graduating from high school, Macy intended to enroll in community college the following autumn. The town, for her gregarious demeanor and commitment to soccer, which are frequently observed at the local field in her Adidas clothing. She had always appeared to have a close relationship with her father, but in recent, friends reported that Macy had been more reserved and silent over the past few weeks, so investigator Marshall wanted to comprehend why he asked Macy about her connection with her father at the beginning of the conversation. Macy said her father worked hard and was often at the auto business, but he still found time for other things. Her voice faltered as she recalled how their connection had lately changed over Sunday lunches at church. Altered a few days prior to the murder, when Macy learned something startling that broke her heart. World. She discovered sexually suggestive texts indicating an affair on her boyfriend Wilson's phone. Between Wilson and her father, the investigators could tell that Remy's discovery had crushed her. Her unfiltered reaction as she spoke was that she felt deceived by both guys and didn't. "I just wanted things to return to normal," she added, crying. "I know how to handle the situation." Marshall attentively listened to the reason for Remy's actions, but I didn't want to trust what I saw in her eyes. It was obvious that she was angry, betrayed, and heartbroken to be engaged in her father's death. Yet as the questioning went on, Macy maintained that she would never harm her father. Her alibi, even if she was furious, was stable as well. She had spent the most of the evening with Wilson the night of the murder, whom several acquaintances had saw them together at a neighborhood event, and they were still in love despite his involvement with her father. Surveillance footage from the famed Ardmore ice cream business brands verified. Despite Remy's emotional distress, her being there provided her with a perfect alibi for the time of the crime. She was identified by the investigators as a possible suspect based on her condition and recent finding. Despite the lack of tangible proof connecting her to Marshall's death, she couldn't get rid of the suspicion that the police's list of suspects didn't include the family secrets that went far deeper than that. Was Sarah, Albert Taylor's 39-year-old wife, who had been blissfully married to him for 20 years. Renowned in Ardmore for being a stay-at-home mom who was deeply involved in the church and the neighborhood. Mom volunteered, led Bible study groups, and organized church activities for a large portion of her time. On the surface, Annie seemed to have the ideal existence at the neighborhood food pantry, a devoted husband, intelligent daughter with a solid reputation in their traditional town. Yet as investigators probed more, they found weaknesses in her ostensibly ideal marriage, friends, and neighbors. Characterized Anne and Albert Taylor's relationship as tense, saying that during the last 5 years, the two had become aloof, with Sarah immersing herself in religion and Albert Taylor spending more time at his auto company. Investigations, it was well known that their loveless marriage lacked the closeness it formerly possessed. When Sarah entered the room 2 days after the murder, Greg Marshall took her in for interrogation. Police station. She appeared worn out and distraught, her eyes red from crying, and she was wearing a basic, flowery dress. Sarah sat opposite the detectives at the table, holding a tissue in her palm. When asked about her husband's marital regimen, Sarah first appeared cooperative. She acknowledged that their relationship had changed for a while, and that we were more like. Her voice broke as she continued, "I can't remember the last time he touched me. They were housemates rather than husband and wife." But my attitude altered when the investigators mentioned Albert Taylor and Wilson's affair. As the inquiry went on, she appeared as though she was in disbelief at the revelation. When the investigators asked her where she was on the night of the murder, Sarah said she was unaware of the nightmare. She was traveling back from a trip to Tulsa to visit her sister, waiting for her. Although her account appeared credible, the police were unable to overlook the fact that Sarah had an obvious motivation. The betrayal of her daughter's lover and her husband would be sufficient to. During the interview, she was agitated and experiencing a mixture of sadness and rage. Defended her innocence, but acknowledged that the affair's disclosure had a significant impact on her. Sarah, like her daughter, had no tangible proof that connected her to the killing, and investigators were aware that more was required to corroborate her role in the case or to completely rule her out. 2 days after Albert Taylor's murder, on the morning of August 23, 2021, Ardmore investigators received. It was a hot, cloudy day with low 90s temps, making it a critical break in the case. Meanwhile, at approximately 10 o'clock, the conservative town was still humming with spicily flavored rumors about the crime. Morning. Detective Greg Marshall received a call from the forensics lab, stating that the teenager had discovered a crucial component of evidence that had been missed when the gun was first searched the Taylor home. Fingerprint traces found on the weapon used to murder Albert Taylor. However, they weren't Sarah's or Detectives Macy promptly went back to the Taylor household to re-examine the site of the incident. Had previously been thoroughly investigated, but this recent development spurred another more in-depth examination as they began going back to the home and the restroom where Albert Taylor was discovered was still roped off, and the area where his corpse was still marked by dirty blood marks. A Smith & Wesson pistol had been found and meticulously packaged as proof. However, the forensic analysis suddenly provided them with a fresh direction because the gun's fingerprints matched. Wilson Davis, Remy's boyfriend, had previously maintained a strong relationship with the family in a variety of ways. 2 years after this revelation, people started to wonder why the rifle had Wilson prints on it. And what part did he play in the murder investigation? Marshall remembered that in his brief first, Wilson had mentioned being with Macy during the interview, and he appeared anxious but not suspicious. That night at the Bronze ice cream store, where a number of pals had verified his alibi, but the prints, Wilson was at the crime site when the cops painted a new image on the pistol. Wilson was contacted and asked to come in for a follow-up since they realized they needed to move cautiously. Interview. They started figuring out how he was related to the Taylor family Albert Taylor had taken. He took Wilson under his wing and offered him financial assistance and a position at the dealership in return for induced sex. But everything was completely upended when the affair was discovered. The new evidence provided the investigators with more questions than answers, but it was evident that Wilson's participation was. As the research went on, the crew felt they were going deeper than they had first believed. For the first time since the murder, they were coming closer to learning the truth and had a concrete, hey, true crime case solvers who want more real-life examples. Here is a lead that might blow the case wide open. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel if you're interested in murder mysteries. What do you think about? If you would want us to look into this situation or one of your own, please leave a comment and be careful. Wilson Davis Remy, 18-year-old boyfriend, swiftly became the center of attention for true crime case solvers. Of the inquiry, after the identification of his fingerprints on the firearm used to murder Albert Taylor, Wilson was a popular football player at Ardmore High School who enchanted the majority of the community with his physical prowess and amiable msarar, but beyond that facade was a disturbed young man. He had experienced a challenging upbringing. His mother battled drug addiction, and Albert Taylor had stepped in as a paternal role after his father had long struggled with alcoholism, offering Wilson a summer job at his car shop and providing housing for him in case things became. When Wilson showed up for his second interview at the Ardmore Police Department, he was tough at home. There was a noticeable tension in the room, and investigator Greg Marshmar was prepared to face him with the new evidence. Wilson sat with his hands resting restlessly on the table, wearing a fading. He stopped wearing the confident swagger he was renowned for on the earlier t-shirt and pants. Wilson was asked to lead the investigators through the night of the football game. Murder once more, recounting how he and Macy had been at Bram's getting shakes and hamburgers. However, his face became pale as he was shown the fingerprint evidence, and he stumbled as he attempted to explain. The cops quizzed him about how his prints might have been on the gun and maintained he didn't murder him. He paused before acknowledging that he had a sexual connection with Albert Taylor Wilson. Albert Taylor had been his lover in addition to being a mentor, and their connection had developed and Wilson felt stuck and devoted to Macy because of something so strong and passionate that he didn't know how to handle. But duped by Albert Taylor, who had given him financial support and used him for unwanted sex. Wilson's voice cracked as the inquiry went on, revealing his emotional state. He denied any role in Albert Taylor's killing, but appeared sincere as he went from defensive to desperate. He claimed to adore Macy and to no longer want to interact with Albert Taylor, but he was conflicted. The police weren't persuaded that his past relationship with Albert Taylor and his prints on the gun were sufficient grounds for keeping. Despite Wilson's impassioned and occasionally volatile reactions, the investigators recognized that he was under investigation. To ascertain his actual involvement in Albert Taylor's murder, they need additional hard proof. Due to his lengthy friendship with the victim, Wilson is still considered a prime suspect. Shadow over the Ardmore Police Department's investigation on August 27, 2021, just before dawn, finally put the tragic truth together following weeks of research and countless interviews. When the killer was eventually apprehended, Macy, Albert Taylor's 18-year-old daughter, she was a clever individual, the last person anyone anticipated to commit such a crime to the outside world. Motivated young lady with goals for college and a love for soccer, yet behind her serene exterior, the inquiry revealed that she had been carrying a heavy burden of resentment and betrayal. When Remy's mother, Sarah Taylor, gave investigators a startling revelation about her, Macy found, within days, sexually suggestive communications between her father and her boyfriend, Wilson Davis. Prior to the murder, this revelation provided Macy with the motivation and resources to murder her father. Remy's alibi was promptly re-examined by authorities when she claimed to be at Braun's, a neighborhood restaurant food chain with Wilson when the murder occurred. But that night's CCTV tape revealed a distinct narrative. The timestamp did not correspond with the schedule Macy provided during. Her destiny was sealed by her first interview and the forensic evidence that connected her to the scene. Police showed up to the Taylor family home, where Macy was residing with her mother, on the evening of August 27. Suddenly, the peaceful Ardmore neighborhood, which is renowned for its conservative values, was alive with the observation of police officers and flashing lights encircling home investigator Greg Marshall, who had been. When the person in charge of the inquiry knocked on the door, Sarah replied with obvious trepidation, but Macy was there behind her. Her gaze was blank. "Macy, you are being held for Albert Taylor Marshall's murder," said quietly as he read her words. Macy remained uncannily composed and showed no signs of alarm. She obeyed the arrest without protest, as though she had already come to terms with her fate. Sarah Taylor fell into the front of the police car as Macy was arrested and being taken there. The fact that her own daughter was sobbing hysterically on the porch, that she even urinated on herself. Neighbors peeked out from behind their windows, saying that she had killed her husband because it was too much to handle. In their small, tight-knit town, they were muttering in shock about what had happened to the Taylor. Although the arrest provided some answers, it left a trail that would forever alter family life. Of devastation in its wake, the trial of Macy Taylor began in Ardmore, Oklahoma, on August 31, 2022. There were several community members and reporters from nearby outlets, including the Ardmore, at the courthouse. Due to the shock wage, the trial was the main topic of local news for both the Taylor family and daily reporters. The district attorney headed the prosecution after the murder struck shockwaves across the tiny, close-knit town. Macy Taylor had acted out of rage and betrayal, according to Michael Granger, who is well known for his evidence from a thorough approach demonstrated that Macy had found improper texts. According to the prosecution, there was a relationship between her father, Albert Taylor, and her lover, Wilson Davis. Macy killed her father in a fit of wrath after learning of the revelation. The murder was one of the main pieces of evidence. Granger painted an image of a young woman with Remy fingerprints on Albert Taylor's firearm. Remy defense lawyer, unable to control her emotions due to loss and jealousy. Veteran attorney Lula Ray McDonald, 72, is known for handling challenging cases, said that Macy had behaved out of intense mental pain. McDonald made note of the fact that Macy had no past criminal history and, according to her, had been a devoted daughter before learning of the affair. That rather than being pleasured, Remy's acts were the consequence of a serious emotional breakdown. McDonald requested that the jury take Remy's age and mental health into account when rendering its verdict in the murder case. Remy's mother and Taylor sat in the courtroom or wore a mask of sadness during the trial and bewilderment. Her face showed signs of emotional strain, and she frequently dabbed at her tears. She reacted with devastation, which was a reflection of the death of her spouse and her connection with Macy. Her daughter looked solemn and seldom spoke to her mother or the audience. The jury found the defendant guilty of second-degree murder on September 10, 2022. received conflicting responses from the community. Some believed that justice had been done, while others were heartbroken by the awful result, as the court gave Macy a 25-year jail term with the potential for release after 15 years. The trial signaled the conclusion of a terrifying chapter. Remy conviction left the family with severe wounds, even though it provided a sense of closure. In the neighborhood, the terrible incidents had permanently altered the lives of all those concerned. After the trial of Macy Taylor had a significant effect on all concerned. Ardmore, Oklahoma, is a community renowned for the murder, and the ensuing events had rocked its tight-knit society and traditional values. Macy Taylor is currently incarcerated at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center for 25 years. She had to deal with a very different existence in McLeod, Oklahoma, than the one she had imagined. Was characterized by loneliness and remorse for the previously promising future she had imagined, including Remy's narrative was about a harsh reality that had supplanted her hopes for college and a profession. Extensively covered by the local media, especially the hard-to-find news outlets like KXIT-TV. In addition to offering updates on her case, the coverage acted as a continual reminder of the terrible incidents, and their lives were permanently altered. Sarah Taylor, Albert Taylor's widow, found it difficult to lead a regular life, had to cope with her husband's death and her daughter's betrayal, and she was well known because participation in charitable events and local church activities. Finding comfort in her religion, she kept on conduct church Bible study sessions, but they did it with a sad heart, and the community came around to support them. Despite the assistance and sympathies she offered, Sarah struggled to get over the broken familial ties and betrayal that Wilson Davis, Remy's ex-boyfriend, also experienced.